All right, y'all. So tonight's conspiracy theory conversations is centered around the CIA, Central Intelligence Agency. All right, so let's get to it. But before we do, I must say, this is for entertainment purposes only. Now let's get to it.
As to all I was able to tell that I was in the CIA. And so I just wanted to hop on and let you know that it was just a few people. I could only tell my parents and my fiance, now husband at the time. But, I suspect a lot more people knew that I was in the CIA than maybe led on, because whenever you get a job at CIA, you have something called a top secret clearance with an SCI, or a top secret SCI clearance with a lifestyle polygraph. And what that involves is a background investigation when they're going around and they're interviewing at least 2 or 3 people in every place you've ever lived and asking them for character references. So I think, anytime you have representatives of the government coming up to you and asking about a particular individual, you're probably going to suspect that they're getting involved in the government and that work is probably classified. So I did have a few people ask if I was at CIA, but of course I, was just able to say I was doing defense consulting, and that was usually enough for most people. And in DC and in particular, there's a lot of folks that work for the government and a lot of people that do classified work. So, when I was young in my 20s, going out to bars and stuff, I really never had anybody push me for information about my job. I just kind of tried to sound as boring as possible and say that I was in tech consulting or defense consulting. So I hope that answers your question. A couple of you have...
The whole time she's talking, I'm going back through anybody I've ever known, from my teachers, co-workers, to anybody that I've come across, and trying to just wonder if they work for the CIA, bro. It's now that she's brought it up in the way she said it. You know what I mean? I know a few people who've talked about those top secret clearance or just clearances, security clearances. They never really said any more than that. That makes you think, man. Like that type of clearance, those type of top secret clearances and stuff like that you have to go through and obtain. If they're that secretive, I wonder what all they make them go through to actually obtain those clearances, man. You're talking about extensive, probably tests. They probably ask you who you know. Have you ever been overseas and talked to somebody? Do you know any spies? And they probably go through the thoroughest of checks, man. Wow, bro. Can you imagine taking one of them tests? Probably like taking like a lie detector test, but probably something at least a little more extensive than that, like way more extensive than that. They would probably ask you all kind of trippy up questions that just trip you up and have you like, huh? Huh? What do you mean?
This leaked FBI document cannot be real. A plan by which the CIA could have as much funds as and when needed, without knowledge of Congress. This report by a member of the FBI to Senator Ed Kennedy in 1989 that he requested them make summarizes a multi-decade long plot between these 5 men: Edward Lansdale, William Colby, George Bush Sr., Richard Armitage, and Colonel Robert Ferreira. The FBI compiled this report from a whole bunch of sources, including their own moles inside the Central Intelligence Agency, because our FBI needs moles inside the CIA in order to know what's going on. Red flag. The master plan called for the CIA to enter into the drug smuggling business in a total and complete fashion. Bush would be the secret head of ONA, Overseas National Airline, and handle all the shipping of the drugs under forged waybills. P.S. TikTok, I'm just reading an FBI document. This is not misinformation. It might not be true. It's just what the FBI thought in 1989. Lieutenant Colonel Ferreira was to use his contacts in Latin America and in the Middle East to obtain from various governments the needed drugs, which I'm not going to read out loud. William Colby was to handle the setting up of all the manpower from runners, peddlers, pushers, collectors, and so forth, as well as the elimination of any who might prove to be uncontrollable, be they American or Vietnamese. Yes, this is William Colby, the future director of the CIA. This report is 24 pages long, and it follows this team across decades as the FBI tracked their operations, smuggling drugs, and doing all sorts of other things. It seriously reads a lot like a spy novel, just without all the fluff, except for this part in the 80s where Colonel Ferreira, who is definitely the dark horse of the story, got pissed off at Noriega of Panama. I can't read all these words out loud. You could pause and read all this for yourself if you want, but Ferreira, it is rumored, went undercover on his own into Panama and somehow made his way into the compound of General Noriega. There, in the general's own bedroom, Ferreira is said to have accosted Noriega, bound him up, and personally did that to him of Noriega, and then he stuffed them into Noriega's mouth. The Bureau actually had the room bugged for other reasons at the time, and they have the whole thing on tape, apparently. In this week's episode, we're breaking down the whole thing, and it's gonna be spicy. This leaked...
Now, for some of us, this isn't new, right? Hearing about what took place in the 80s, possibly maybe even earlier than that. The whole drug gang situation. If you ever seen the show Snowfall, like, I think this past year, I just finally finished it. It took me, I think, probably a year to get through it, man. I don't get to watch TV much, but it talks about how they needed money and they stumbled into the drug game to obtain money to fund the war and different things that they needed as far as weapons and all that kind of stuff like that. You know what I mean? A lot of that stuff probably was you know what I mean, fabricated for the show, but the premise around it, we understood what they were saying, you know what I mean? And just to know that was going on, and they tried to keep like the president separate from it, allegedly. This is all allegedly, by the way. They tried to keep, and I'm speaking about the show, let's put it in that aspect, the show. They tried to keep the president sheltered from it. That way he could have plausible deniability if things ever came out and stuff like that. So they went rogue and was doing all of this stuff, you know what I mean? But bringing the money back. And it was just insane to just sit there and watch that show and be like, are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? They don't even care the effects that this stuff is having on the people in the communities and stuff like that. They didn't care. They're just bringing it in, truckloads full of it. I was mind blown, man. You always hear about it, but to see somebody really create a show based around it, create a show based around all of that stuff was just, I just couldn't believe it, man. It was insane to see.
All right, so I want to talk a little bit about what it was like to be a woman at CIA. I worked for a woman who was extremely hard on me. When I first got to CIA and this operational division, I was really intimidated because she brought me into her office on the first day and was like, number one, what are you doing here? You did not graduate from an Ivy League school, so I don't even understand why you're here. I graduated from Florida State University, which is a really good program, but it wasn't good enough for her. And I assume probably because people were just as hard on her whenever she came into CIA. But it brought up like an interesting question is, why is it as women, do we all, and I know this is a generalization, and I know not everybody's like this, but do we like compete with each other and try to put each other down in order to raise each other up? Why don't we all, work together in order to help promote one another? So it was really weird with this woman. I remember being in a video teleconference, and we were talking about my target that I was in charge of with Baghdad Station. And she took the remote from me when I was talking about my target because she didn't want me to have any kind of attention from Baghdad Station from my targeting efforts. So that's just like one example of the things that she would try to do to try to sabotage my career. I wasn't the only one within the division. I mean, she would comment on other women in the office. A lot of us were younger, much younger than she was, and she would comment about our clothes and make suggestions for where we should shop and how we should dress more conservatively. We were all in our 20s, so like, you know, we wanted to wear what we wanted to wear. It was nothing inappropriate, but she just kind of wanted to put us in our place all the time, whether that was about our clothing or our education, or we're sitting in a conference or a briefing, and always trying to like sabotage us. So you know, and I thought a kind of an interesting story that you know, women in intelligence, if we, you know, work together and raise each other up, like how far we could go. And certainly that was not my only experience with women. The other women that I banded together with, I'm still friends with today. Some are still at CIA and some have left, but they are some of my best friends and my closest allies. So I hope that gives a little bit of insight. All right, so I want to talk a little bit about what it was like to be a woman at CIA. I worked for a woman who was extremely hard on me. When I first got to CIA and this operational division, I was really...
Unfortunately, unprofessionalism is just everywhere. You know what I mean? Sucks that she has to go through that, but it's everywhere. Sometimes it's just people, and her boss or supervisor will take case in point an example. She could have been brought in and the same thing could have been done to her. She could have been treated like that. She probably felt the same way this woman felt. It probably demeaned her, made her feel bad, made her not as confident about her job and her performance and stuff like that. You know what I mean? It affects your performance. But instead of her breaking that cycle and saying the next group that comes up under me, I won't make them feel like I felt. You know what I'm saying? Instead of them doing that, some people just be like, okay, this is the way it should go. And I'm going to continue it. And those are a lot of times are followers, not leaders. They're not innovative. They're not going to take a stand for themselves and the ones coming up behind them, man. We've seen it all. It just used to be like in certain workplaces, man, that hostile type environment. When you know, like even that, like, what are you doing here? You didn't come from an Ivy League school, but I'm qualified. So what's the difference? We used to say this about, it was this person that told me this saying about doctors. When I struggled to pass my EMT test. Oh my gosh, I struggled to pass that thing in the beginning. And I bust my behind. I just wasn't a great test taker. You know what I'm saying? So it took me 2 or 3 tries to get it. And what my instructor said, because she used to work with me, she's still my favorite lady to this day, one of my favorite ladies to this day. And she used to work with me, and she knew I had worked so hard that I had became one of the best. I just struggled at taking tests. You know what I mean? And one day she told me, she was like, listen, we're going to get you to pass this test. And I don't care if you pass it with a 70, 80, or whatever. She was like, you don't know when you go to the hospital or you go to see a doctor, all you know is he's wearing that white coat. You don't know if he made a 70 on his test and barely passed, or he made a 90 on his test, do you? And I was like, you know what? You're right. You're right. So for her to be like, you didn't come from Ivy League school, so that means she didn't work hard? Stop it. Stop it, man. You know what I mean? It just sucks that it's people like that in the world.
The CIA could manipulate the news in the United States.
The intelligence community wants to assassinate somebody. They want to run this illegal program here, there, or everywhere.
I will tell you, Director Deutsch, as a former Los Angeles police narcotics detective, that the agency has dealt drugs throughout this country for a long time.
Never heard nobody call it the corrupt intelligence agency, bro. But don't that send chills down your spine to hear them say that about drugs, man? and to associate the CIA with it. A lot of people, man, if you can go back to those times, or if some of those people are still alive from that era, I would love to hear their interviews. Excuse me. I would love to hear their interviews and hear them talk about what it was like back then, what they went through, what they experienced when that stuff hit the scene. Like when it was new, when it was social. Remember, in those times, it wasn't like these days. It was a social thing. And a lot of those things, you had to have money. So it was looked at as, you know, the rich people type thing to do, party, have fun, and you would do these things. That's how it was back then. But then it took a turn from the worst when people got involved and they wanted to make it cheaper because it was expensive for others, and they wanted to make it cheaper for people who couldn't afford the expensive ones and stuff like that, man. Listen, man, y'all gonna have me wanting to go watch Snowfall again. Great show.
Okay, y'all have to watch this clip from a show from 1981, and then let's talk about it after.
The ones you should be arresting, not me. Why don't you say that before? What we got here? Cam, this is William Klein. He was wrecking our office. I just wanted to meet them face to face. I wanted them to admit what they were doing. Who is they? He was in the office of the Trilateral Commission. Trilateral Commission? Yeah, the Trilateral Commission. All right, what is the Trilateral Commission? It's an organization founded in 1973 by David Rockefeller to bring together business and political leaders from the United States, Europe, Japan, so they could work together for better economic and political cooperation between their nations. And that's what they'd like us to believe. But you see, what they're really up to is a scheme to plant their own loyal members in positions of power in this country.
Man, these shows have been trying to tell us something for the longest, bro. They've been trying to tell us for the longest. We just weren't paying attention. You know what I mean? We wasn't unplugged from the matrix, but it's been right in front of our eyes, them talking about it. Those names, Rockefeller. Those names been right in front of our faces the whole time. And they did it in little joking ways, but there were some serious undertones there that they were just trying to put that in front of us, food for thought. Like, imagine how many shows was doing that back then. It ain't just The Simpsons and stuff like that. It was other ones.
A highly classified CIA document, The Story of Adam and Eve, unveils a chilling scenario of our world's demise. It posits that the Earth's poles, particularly the North and South poles, shift every 12,000 to 15,000 years, causing catastrophic earthquakes and tsunamis. After the apocalypse, humanity reverts to prehistoric times, akin to the Stone Age. This recurring cycle has led to the rise and fall of 6 civilizations, with ominous signs of another reset evident today, including climate change, pandemics, and the looming threat of a Third World War. It might explain the fate of Atlantis, an ancient Greek island now submerged beneath the waves.
So it's kind of like hitting that reset button. I told y'all about the poles, man. And if you ain't read up on that, the pole shifts, like that could be approaching soon. When? I don't know, but something like that could be approaching. And according to history, we won't survive it when it happens. The weather change is just too much for us to bear. And then life as we know it, we'll hit the reset button and we'll start over with everything like that. Or, like I've said before, Elon Musk figuring out some kind of way, or Jeff Bezos or somebody figures out some kind of way to get us off this planet to another planet. But we don't have anyone that's habitable for us that we know of just yet. So there's that.
CIA has released a document with newfound evidence about cataclysmic events on Earth. It was declassified in 2013. It's called the Adam and Eve story. You can find it on Google. The document explains that we have a 60-mile thick outer crust of our Earth. It rests on a layer that's 60 to 120 miles wide of molten lava. Now, that molten layer usually acts as a solid, but every couple thousand years, the magnetic and electrical orderliness inside of the Earth is disrupted. That layer then acts as a liquid lubricant for the outer crust to rotate tremendous amounts in just a quarter to a half a day. The shift is so tremendous because the ice caps cause the poles to move near the equator. Oddly enough, 2 cataclysms ago aligns with Plato's account of Atlantis. The sudden shift in Earth's crust that caused the relocation of these areas resulted in rising sea levels, earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, and mass extinctions. This helps explain why scientists have found such sudden climate changes and extinctions frozen in time. Like and comment for part 2, where I'll explain how this relates to Genesis 1, 2, and 3 and change your thoughts on Adam and Eve. It's time to go to the...
Now, the crazy part about that is what I've heard from people about that book is that all of it, or everything that's classified, has not been declassified. So it's still information out there about that we haven't been given yet. They're still holding things from us, man. But yes, there we go again, talking about the pole shifting and different things that could possibly happen. Bro, why? Why? It's just frustrating. It's frustrating. It's frustrating. Why are they keeping this stuff from us? Oh, it's the whole, we don't want to create panic. Some of this stuff that you hear kind of relates to the Bible, don't it? It's just in a different form. You know what I mean? The stories are different, but kind of aligns with what they're saying here. How things could happen, how mankind could end, possibly, different things like that. You ever notice that? Just start connecting the dots, man. Start connecting the dots.
Can we trust them? I have talked with one man who worked in the Defense Intelligence Agency who told me, quote, Linda, our government has proof that 3 competing extraterrestrial civilizations have been mixing and matching genes to create all kinds of life forms on this planet for at least 270 million years, before the time of the dinosaurs. And there is something about that that has always made sense to me when you match up what people have said and the stories that are in books. And it may be that those are the 3 civilizations that the DIA guy meant when he said there have been 3 competing, Greys, Blondes, and the reptilians. But he went further and said the reptilians say and claim that they have been on Earth first. Sort of like the Garden of Eden story. And they resent the coming of the blondes and the grays, and that the 3 had been at each other's throats over this planet because it is an extraordinary planet. That it is really more like a laboratory.
See? Now, that sounds like the stories we've heard from back in the day when they said they were here searching for abundant resources that we had on this planet. They got tired, they put us here. But something else she said kind of caught my eye. They're here, they're reproducing. I always thought about them being here, but I never thought of their population growing from here. I always felt like more came from another planet or something, but no, they're here and they're growing here. That's insane to think of, fam. We've talked about overpopulation before, but is that where it's coming from? And then the different species, we're back on that again. And then for them to say what they said about the story of Adam and Eve, and then they're here. This is the last one, and this was crazy. They're bickering and fighting with each other. So we can have something pop off that has nothing to do with us. It's amongst themselves that could spill over and affect us. And y'all still don't want to give us this information? Shaking my head, man. Shaking my head. Y'all still don't want to give us this information. And these jokers here could be starting their own little beef or war situation, whatever you want to call it. This is crazy, man. I'm done. I'm done for the night, man. I'm done. I'm going to bed. This is getting me upset to even think about this even happening, and we know nothing about it. We're blind to the fact. Listen, y'all get at me in the comment section, man. It's your boy, stick around and stay tuned. Till the next one, I'm gone.